Meeting of the Middleton Select Board here at Fuller Meadow School. Remind everybody that the meeting, all meetings are recorded audio and visually, so you can look at them at a later date. The first item of business, as always, will be a reading of the warrant, number 2517, and the Facilities Project 55. If Mr. Solzback, if you would be so kind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have before you this evening warrant 2517 dated February 20th, 2025. On the payroll side of things, totaling in at about $970,000. You'll note overtime, about $15,000 on the fire side and about $9,000 for police, a trend that we continue to monitor and incorporate into our budget process for the upcoming fiscal 26. Also, you'll see $24,420 detail pay note under the fire line. There was a failure of the fire suppression system at the Bostic plant, and so we had to park a crew there until that was resolved. We get reimbursed for that eventually. On bills payable, totaling in at about $1.6 million. A couple notes under administrator, technically the library, $5,850 for library maintenance. That was for BCA architects who did the conditions assessment as part of the capital plan last year. So that proved to be an excellent report that's helping better inform the approach for capital planning in the library over the next few years. On the DPW, you'll see about $60,000 for a snow plow, $18,000 for salt, a clear indicator of the season we're in presently. For the schools, $219,000 for health insurance premiums and about $160,000 on the town side of things. And then for facilities project 55 at the bottom there, we're really starting to draw that down pretty rapidly, about $3.2 million. Majority of that is construction services, and we have a little update on that later. And then $373,000 labeled as security system, but there's a little more that's in as part of that from a soft cost perspective, but totaling in at $3,283,062.
So where does the snow and ice budget stand?
So that is in my TA report, but I can offer that the invoices rolling in now from last weekend's storm, we've pretty much depleted the budget entirely, so we'll be deficit spending for the remainder of the season. And that's everything for now.
Can I ask along those lines? So do we ever consider, when we have a year when we go way under on snow, like putting that in a segregated place for future heavy snow winters? Like last two winters before this, we had no snow. I'm sure we were way under budget. Now this year, we might need a town meeting article because we're likely going to be over budget. Did we ever think of in the light winters putting some money in a separate snow account to be used for future heavy snow years?
Stabilization fund or something like that, yeah. I could look into it. I do know that for the snow and ice line, that's the only one that you can deficit spend under Mass General Law, and so being afforded that flexibility, it's typically not much of an issue, but I could see where if you ran into a year where it was just catastrophic and you have no way of realistically predicting it, maybe there's value in being able to dip into something there, but
But that type of account would also need authorization to spend from, wouldn't it? Unless there was like
unless
a
it was like a
revolving.
FinCom reserve or something.
Yeah, just to be used only for future years when you're over, once you hit the budget amount.
Well, if you put it into like a reserve fund, you'd have to two-thirds appropriation to actually
Release it.
release it from town meeting, but,
So, I mean, now the extra flows to free cash. When we don't spend it, it goes to free cash, and when we do spend it, we take it from free cash, so free cash
Yeah,
kind
just to
of does the same thing.
Yeah, but kind of keep it set. If it's budgeted for snow, keep it for snow forever.
Yeah.
And it might level out over 10 years, it might all level out.
I'll
Just a thought,
see
that's all.
what the mechanics of it
Okay.
are, but it is a little bit 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah.
but, Yeah.
You maybe check with Paul too, because while you sometimes aren't plowing snow, I'm sure salt is used for, other times that inclement, the winter.
Yeah,
that they
so I'm
weren't
talking salt,
plowing it, but, you know what I
salt too,
mean?
yeah. We probably spend as much on salt as we do on snow
Oh, you're saying the
removal.
whole budget?
Yeah, the
Plowing
whole-
and snow. plus
So,
salt.
yeah, combine it with
Oh,
the
okay.
snow and salt,
Oh, I thought you
because
said
that's all one budget, right? The
Yeah,
salt and
we can-
snow.
We can take a look.
But right now, it's all one line item, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Snow and ice.
Yeah, snow and ice, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anything else? Nothing else. All right, then we'll move to,
Well, I move to approve
sorry, yeah.
warrant 2517 and facilities project warrant 55.
Second.
we have motion and a second, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, passed unanimously. Thank you. We've all had a chance to look at the open session minutes for February 4, 2025, and executive session February 4th, 2025. I'd like to mention there was an amendment to the open session minutes where we striking last name Nemeth as being appointed. She was not appointed that evening. Any discussion or questions on the minutes?
I'll move to accept as presented with the amendment.
Second.
Any further discussion? Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, passed unanimously. At this point, we'll go to the town administrator updates and reports. Justin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some notes around town. We continue to meet with department heads to review capital requests for fiscal year '26, and that list is nearly fully compiled. You'll be reviewing that in your entirety, or in its entirety, with the Finance Committee at the upcoming Saturday, March 1st Budget Summit for capital, and that is a public meeting people would like to watch. We continue to cover the Flint Public Library by committee, and I joined the trustees at their meeting last week where we had a good conversation about upcoming capital needs from that conditions assessment that I referenced in the warrant. So thank you to the Library Board of Trustees for the continued support there. We also continue to meet, Jackie and I, with the library team over there on a regular basis, just as a team meeting on Fridays, and we appreciate their additional efforts helping dig deep as we get through the next couple months, some staffing hiccups. Town administration and finance teams from Middleton, Topsfield, and Boxford have been meeting pretty regularly to talk about budgetary concerns for fiscal '26, in particular in areas where we overlap, which is typically the schools. So we continue to take a look at that. ATA Bresnahan and I joined members of MassDOT District 4 last week to discuss a full study of Route 114, something that we've been talking about over the past year and a half or so, and also just trying to identify the best ways to approach and secure funding for future roadway improvements. We do have some concern that we've expressed over time that a portion of the TIP, for example, is state-funded and has yet to be officially determined, but it may require local appropriation to cover that element instead of state to match with the federal. But we're trying to be proactive about that, so we'll keep an eye on that piece. Members of our team had a walkthrough at the new municipal campus today. It was very cold. We go there once a week to meet with the construction team and run through budgetary items. We typically don't get out into the buildings quite as frequently, so it was nice to see a lot of the progress going on in there. They've framed out a lot of the interior, and there's a little bit of an update actually next up on the agenda, but I suppose I can cover it now. So they are doing most of the mechanical, so you'll see a lot of conduit pulled before they went and laid the slab, the concrete for the floor in there. They're hanging a lot of the HVAC system up above and running that now that everything's open, and a lot of the plumbing as well, going between the first and second floors and running to the utility spaces, so that's good to see. In the apparatus bay, I guess, which would be interest to all of you, they're starting the process on insulating the floor for the radiant flooring. They'll do the insulation, then run the tubing, and then eventually pour over that. That's a pretty interesting process for the radiant heat in the apparatus bay. And then also they've been chipping away at the masonry on the exterior of the building. So obviously it's very cold outside, so they're tarping and blanketing where appropriate to allow the mortar an opportunity to set up, and then they'll move on to the next section. So they're really starting to move along there, and the team's doing a great job. We received early numbers for health insurance from Maya. They're not great, but they're slightly preliminary. So in response, we've scheduled a follow-up meeting this week with some representatives from Maya to discuss different options. There's really no guarantee that we can budge any of those numbers, but we want to take a hard look at them before we discuss them publicly. And lastly, we've had several qualified candidates for the assistant treasurer role, with interviews expected to occur over the coming weeks once those are finalized. So that was good to see. And nothing else to add beyond that.
Any questions?
All right.
Thank you, Justin. And if then, Middleton Municipal Campus, or did you
We can just
include
pass it.
that in that? Very good, sir. Thank you very much. All right, now we'll move on to item number 2, which is public comment, which we do every meeting. Anyone present wish to give a public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, which is an important recognition for the Middleton Fire Department for the 2024 brush fire and its response. I think, does Chief want to?
So good evening, everybody. Thank you
Thanks,
for having us tonight. So as you're well aware, we had 2 pretty significant brush fires that started on or about October 27th. The first fire was in the area of the Middleton Reservoir and consisted of about 230-ish acres. And once that was extinguished, we had a second incident involving the Boxford State Forest, which involved Middleton, Boxford, and North Andover, and that was total acreage was about 550 acres. So when it was all said and done, we had about 700 plus acres. It was about 30 plus days that the members of the department were heavily involved in trying to extinguish. It was dry conditions, and it was definitely a painstaking process. But fortunately, with the help of the members behind me, we were able to put the fires out, and fortunately we had no structures that were affected, and really the hard work of the members that really made it possible. And I also want to take a moment to recognize the other departments that were part of the process, including the police department and the DPW, in particular the superintendent, Mr. Goodwin. I called him all hours of the day, asking for equipment, asking for manpower, and he never once wavered. He came through each and every time, and I greatly appreciate that. And also I want to recognize a couple of members in the audience. First, my father, Ken LaColst, retired member of the fire department, who was definitely chomping at the bit to help out, and it gave him some small tasks to kind of keep him busy, run some errands. I appreciate it. And lastly, Johnny Jones, who helped out with some equipment issues that we had throughout the process. So both of you, I appreciate your help. And I also want to thank Mr. McCarthy, Jason McCarthy from the Danvers Water. We occupied his property for 20 plus days. We had a big trailer parked in his parking lot, and he said whatever we needed, he was there to help. So, certainly I appreciate those efforts. So I have some certificates if you'd like me to
Sure.
to hand those out. I'll call you folks up. All right, so Alex Walsh. Sorry. Frank Twist. Seem to be paying attention. It basically says, for selfless actions and willingness to protect the town of Middleton during the 2024 wildland fires. Glad I was able to help. Appreciate your help. Thank you. Riley Warner. Lieutenant Hopalon. Firefighter Nicholas LaColst. Thank you. Firefighter Zachary Ingraham. Thank you. Firefighter Sean Perret. Firefighter Alex Walsh. Firefighter Tim Souza. Firefighter Michael LeBlanc. Thank you, Chief. And Captain Tyler DeShane. Sean's here, okay. Okay,
All right?
Don't go anywhere.
okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much on behalf of the town and, the board, the town, and all its residents. I would like to take this moment here, though, to extend further thanks to our very own chief, Doug LaCoste. Remember how proud it was in October back at the Flint when, you were officially appointed and having, your dad and your family be there. That was a really big thing for the town, and you've done nothing but make us proud every step of the way, and certainly up to including this. So I'd like to take this time to present you with this, Chief LaCoste. For selfless actions and willingness to protect the town of Middleton during the 2024 wildland fires, we, the members of the Select Board and the Fire Chief, do hereby order that our commendation be extended and further order and direct while duly assembled in session at the Select Board's meeting in Middleton under the Charter and ordinances of the town of Middleton, that this official expression pride be set forthwith on behalf of the Select Board, the Fire Chief, and the citizens of the town of Middleton. Attest and testimony whereof we have hereunto set our hands and sealed on this 18th day of February, 2025. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
We'll do pictures out in the hall, Mr. Chair, is that so you can carry on with your business?
Sure.
We'll do some pictures for the department.
And, while we're, thanking, the fire department for their actions, also I want to ask, all the town residents that live near fire hydrants, after snowstorms, if you can, please shovel around the fire hydrant. Make their life a little easier.
Very good. Okay. So, once you guys, gentlemen, you can go out and get some photos taken with those, and we're going to carry on here.
Thank you to all of you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
gentlemen. All right. Next, I'm sorry, so next in part of this, though, is to make a recognition of all the other municipalities and agencies that supported the town of Middleton wildland fire of 2024. Thanking all those communities. Yeah. There were 75 total departments that came to our aid, Middleton's aid, in this past fall. And in recognizing each and every one of those, we'll have sending them a thank you on behalf of the citizens of the town of Middleton. We thank you for the assistance you provided during the fall 2024 brush fires. Without your committed response, your knowledge, and your professionalism, this difficult situation could have been much worse. We were so impressed with the municipal and state agencies who supported Middleton Fire Department throughout this emergency response, and we greatly appreciate the partnership and assistance. So these will be going out to each and one of those 75 communities and their individual departments. All right. Moving on. So we have, we had initially planned on making a appointment, but prior to the start of this meeting, we were notified of a withdrawal with the individual that was listed. But we'll take this time to mention that we do have, at this time, Board of Appeals, one alternate for one-year term available.
Do we? We appointed one at the last meeting. I don't know if we,
Oh, that, you know what, that was pulled off the website and it may have not been updated.
yeah, no, I think
So
that's been
scratch-
filled
scratch
with.
that
Scratch this
Yep.
one? Was that Cheryl's?
No, that was Linda.
Linda Richards.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's right.
Linda
that's
Richards
right.
now.
Thank you.
Thanks for catching that. 1 3-year term for the Cultural Council. And including this last-minute withdrawal, we have 2 alternate one-year term openings for the ICDRC. So, reaching out to the people in town to see if they have some time where they can volunteer and assist the town of Middleton. All right. That will move on to item number 6, which is a preliminary list review of the articles for the May 13th upcoming 2025 annual town meeting. And we have those items numbered in our packet. And if you would, Mr. Sulzbach, you can carry us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we will continue to provide updates in this fashion up until you close the warrant sometime upcoming in March. But we just want to provide an opportunity, I guess, to the public to kind of see how these things take shape as we move throughout the process. So at this point in time, for the May 13th, 2025 annual town meeting, our preliminary list of warrant articles totals in at 25. A good chunk of them are usual and customary articles. We'll read through them all here, but I don't anticipate to have any in-depth discussion on any of these items. It's exclusively as info this evening. So for current and prior year financial articles, to hear committee reports, pay bills of a prior fiscal year, fund collective bargaining agreements, and a snow and ice deficit. So some of these are a little bit more of a placeholder in fashion. So for example, prior year bills, we don't necessarily know if we have any yet. Usually they're relatively small, something that got missed, but we don't legally have the authority to pay them outside of a fiscal year. Funding collective bargaining agreements, the only outstanding one we have at this point in time is the folks at the library. We don't know if we'll have a plan in place in time for May, but we'd like to have that on there as a placeholder just in case we can get it together. Excuse me. And then snow and ice deficit, as we referenced earlier this evening, will be going into that territory, so we won't have a final figure for that until leading up to town meeting when hopefully we're in the clear for snow and ice for the season. For fiscal 26 financial articles, the fiscal 26 compensation for elected officials. Article 6 would be the fiscal 26 omnibus budget. Number 7 would be the fiscal 26 public safety operating budget override. So once again, going on the assumption, based on feedback we got at the February Saturday budget meeting, looking at potentially 4 firefighters and 3 police officers, so that would be there. Article 8, elementary school operating budget override. Once again, just based on early budgetary conversations, we provided guidance at a certain number, and it seems at this point in time anyway, the elementary schools are going to have to exceed that, which would necessitate an override. Article 9, fiscal 26 Masconomic regional operating budget override. Same situation at this point in time. It's early, but all indications show they're probably going to have to go for an override, so we have a placeholder there. Articles 10 and 11 are relative to the Community Preservation Act, specifically for debt service projects and expenses, and then number 11 would be for new projects, which there are a couple on the capital plan that we'll review on the upcoming February 1st. It's a Saturday capital budget summit. Number 12, authorize fiscal 26 revolving fund spending limits, where we don't anticipate a change. Article 13, fiscal 26 South Essex Sewerage District Enterprise Budget. Article 14, fiscal 26 Water Enterprise Budget. Article 15, accept a sum from the Middleton Electric Light Department, which they're meeting Thursday of this week to finalize that figure, but I've been in conversation with Mike Cloutier, just trying to narrow something down as a reliable placeholder in our budget. That's effectively a pilot payment. Article 16, transfers to reserve accounts. We have some recommendations to kind of off the top of our free cash to tuck some resources away where appropriate. Article 17, fiscal 26 capital budget, which we'll discuss in depth on the first. 18, Masconomic regional capital request. 19, Fuller Meadow roof construction debt capital request. I think the placeholder estimate they have is 2.2 million, but I want to see if we can tighten up that figure, or at least tie it back to some backup. And we do have a meeting with them later in this week to finalize some of those details. Article 20, a Middleton 300th committee appropriation. We had talked about putting this in the capital plan and then opted to have it stand alone on its own to try to give it more visibility, just to get it in the front of people's mind. It's not until 28, so we have some time, but that's closer than it appears. And then rounding things out, citizens petitions, bylaw adoptions, and real property. So Article 21, charter review recommendations. They are meeting Thursday of this week actually as well to get some public input on proposed changes. Article 22 would be a floodplain bylaw. Article 23, surplus of town properties, the police station. And 24, surplus of town properties to be determined. We have a conversation later on this evening on the agenda that will kind of explain that, but basically, some of our surplus properties are a little easier to dispose of than others, in so many words, but we'll get into that later. And then 25, a conservation restriction for 105 South Main Street, the back half of the property on the golf course, which is something that's outstanding, but we did have a nice conversation with the Brown sisters. They visited us in my office last week. We had a little conversation about that. So on a high view, that's what we're looking at this point in time. This list will continue to shift and change as we get closer to the end of the runway here, but for now anyway. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So the charter review, they're coming with actual articles, warrant article to make changes to the town charter this May?
That's the plan.
And will that be, so will their work be done, and are they bringing them all in the same year? Are they gonna bring some this year and then continue in maybe some next year, or?
I believe they'd like to do it in one block. They've been working.
That was the intent, I think,
Yep.
when the committee was formed.
Yeah, to do it all in.
All at once.
It's taken a little longer. It was initially suggested when it was created, that would be report back the next year, which didn't happen, but, you know, it's, as far as I know, I attended their last meeting, and the impression I got is they'll make whatever recommendations they finalize, all as one package to be presented.
But I would hope they would be, other than housekeeping ones, I would hope any substantive ones would be separate articles. I would
I'd
wanna
agree,
see.
I'd agree with that. I think it's similar to how the moderator lumps together
Consent.
non-controversial housekeeping
Yes.
items, I think, on the charter review. I think bigger items that may be of interest to the voting populace that's at town meeting, it should be a standalone
Yeah,
warrant article.
maybe you can relay that from
Yeah,
us,
I'll shoot them an email and let
Yeah.
them know if they can find some way to part it out that makes sense.
even if it's 5 articles, so be it.
Yep. Okay.
That's more than appropriate for that.
Justin, when are we proposing to close the town meeting warrant?
We had just talked about it. It's in
March
March,
18th.
March 18th.
So a month from today. So the only reason why I ask this is I usually try to remind this, if there are folks that are looking to do citizens petition, please communicate with the town administrator's office, because many times an early communication can help solve an issue of a citizen's petition that comes in that is either poorly written or poorly proposed, that will just cause consternation on town meeting floor. And secondly, have you heard of any inklings of any citizens petitions?
Nothing.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, Justin. No further questions on that. We can move on and review, as we've been mentioning leading up to this point. Review and have a discussion on modifying the upcoming select board schedule, specifically its start time. And we want to make sure that, you know, we have this out in the open, because, you know, what's convenient for some is inconvenient for all, and we just want to have a discussion here, and any change of a time here, what kind of impact that's going to have on residents and the biggest concern. Have we heard any, I mean, it hasn't been, we've been somewhat public about it, but has there been any input to your office or to the town hall in regards to?
No,
This now?
I haven't heard feedback from anybody.
My only comment, I would think it should be an agenda item that's on the agenda, you know, vote to change to 5 p.m. I mean, personally, for me, 5 p.m. is great for me. But there's people, you know, people that want to come home from work and watch it on local access, or come that work 9 to 5. At least if it was an agenda item, you know, maybe if they saw it in the agenda and they could contact us, like, it's not, people don't know.
I'd be more, where you can always watch it later, which is tough, but, I mean, I'd be concerned of being able to facilitate individuals as business comes up, that, you know, that we're flexible enough that, you know, that we answer their needs as far as when they could have, when they could make it, if there was something involved that they were, specifically involved in a thing that we have the flexibility to be able to put those later on an agenda if, an earlier start time was, created a hardship for people.
And
How would that be addressed?
Yeah, so that is our current practice, in full understanding that people have lives outside of these meetings, or if they have work obligations, we'll shift them or sometimes communicate with them in advance of the meeting to push things back. And then communicate that to the chair, just to make sure people have an opportunity to attend. I would envision if this change were to happen, our intent would be to put or continue putting some of the business up front that people aren't really chomping at the bit to come and discuss, like review of the warrant and things like that. And if there were more kind of, hot button issues, put them towards the back to provide an opportunity for people to come. I think the inverse of the issue we see is that, while not all the time, but frequent enough, if we have evenings where we're going until 9 or 9:30 at night, the transparency drops off on the other end as well, because I know as much as people enjoy spending time with us, I don't think they want to be out, especially in the dead of winter that late, sitting and discussing some of these items. So it is a little bit of a balancing act. To Mr. Garber's point, we have been putting it on the agenda as a shift to 5 PM, and we still haven't heard anything from people, but
What do some of the other boards do? I know the old days of 7:30 has kind of disappeared. So we moved from 7:30 to 7
then
and then
6.
6. But like, what about like Masco or the elementary school committees?
honestly, I don't know.
I think
offhand.
elementary's 5.
School
isn't it?
committees are 7 unless they're doing executive and then they go to 5 for the tri-town. But they're a little later than us most of the time, but
No, a lot of their meetings are like at 5 or 5:30.
but those are typically executive.
No, regular.
Open now too?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, Masco's at 7. I mean, whatever time we have is gonna be more convenient for some, less convenient, for others, The change from 7:30 to 7 would have been the same thing. The change from 7 to 6 would have been the same thing. So, I'm not,
The unknown is how many people watch it live from home. We have no,
Yeah.
No, but I know a lot of people watch us on Memorex.
Right.
Through our website.
Right.
And
that you can see, it actually
And I
says-
usually find, when folks reach out and ask me questions about a meeting, it's usually like 2 or 3 days after the meeting, where they said they've seen it on the website, i.e., what has usually happened is when it gets posted to the website, some type of notification goes out and folks actually go on and look at it. And I know you guys are you're very timely for getting these up on the site. Like, for example, the Saturday budget meeting that we had, very quickly that was up on the site. And folks were reviewing it and seeing it there. One of the reasons why I like a 5 PM start is, if you notice, almost, not every, but just about every meeting, beyond the 2 folks that are sitting to my right, there's at least one department head at our meeting, many times multiple department heads. And I appreciate those that come to attend our meeting, but those that also come because they're being requested to do updates, budget reviews, department updates. We're asking folks to work all day and then wait around for several hours for a select board meeting or to come home and then come back. I think part of that is reflective of that. Secondly, I think for a lot of folks that occasionally we do get an audience here, I actually think, my opinion is 5 o'clock would probably work a little bit better for folks. I recommend that we move to 5 o'clock and then see if we receive any input of it's working or not working.
so, yeah. I was thinking along the same lines. That's, move in March to the 2 meetings at 5 o'clock, depending on what, if any, feedback we get. We can either continue it or adjust it.
If we're open-minded to going back to 6, I could support 5. I would have rather seen it as an agenda item, because you figure the people that might care are people that probably look at the agenda, and it has not been on an agenda yet. That's my only concern.
I mean, I could, 5 or 6 doesn't really make much difference to myself, but I'll be in favor of what, the board wants to do. I don't know how better else to put it out there in front of people. I mean, is it another week is it another meeting on an agenda satisfy that, or?
Well, I think we will get the best feedback if once we do it and people either like it or more precisely, don't like it.
Right.
So that's my, we scheduled the 2 March meetings at 5 o'clock, and then depending on what feedback we get, then we adjust accordingly going forward after March.
I mean, I think here's another reality of, I wish every meeting we had a full audience here. I know there's concern about, folks may want to watch this live at home. The growing number of individuals that are unplugging from cable and moving to internet only with streaming services means the only way that they're going to watch our meeting is through,
Online.
is online,
I
which
can't
is,
see it. I don't
which
know.
is not going to happen live. And I'll readily admit it, I don't even, sorry to our great guys in the back room that are recording this, I don't even know what our public access channel is on cable. I couldn't tell you if my life depended on it.
22 on Comcast.
Oh, look at that. What is it on Verizon?
What?
What is it on Verizon?
I
See,
don't have Verizon.
but I do know exactly where to go on the town's website to click on to see any of the boards that are listed, because I've done that
Can you
sometimes.
see it online or just on the cable TV channel?
You can watch it live on the,
Yeah.
right now, you can go to, if you have Comcast or
Otherwise,
Verizon, you
you
can
watch
turn your
the
TV on and
recording.
watch it
Yeah, on
right
the
now.
TV, but
And then they'll replay it a few times, but you never know when.
And
But
then
you can-
eventually, if you want to watch it again, you got to go to the
The
town
next day,
website.
like
Yeah.
this meeting tomorrow, at some point.
Yeah,
we'll
they're-
get
they're
on
very
the
quick at
website.
getting
You
it.
can watch on your
On the town
computer.
website.
You can even watch it on your phone.
Right.
done that.
Yeah, because I cut the cord a while ago, so.
Yeah, so I support moving it to 5, but I think we should continue to ask questions of folks that are both appearing before the board or any comments that we're hearing out there. If you want a bellwether of what's happening in town, people are always quick when they're stopping by in town hall at the clerk's office, which is kind of the place where a lot of people come to both talk about good and bad that's happening in town. I'd welcome to ask both our clerk and others if they're receiving any input from folks as well. And if 5 becomes an issue for folks, we can revisit it. I got to tell you, when we moved from 7:30 to 7 and then 7 to 6, at least from 7 to 6, I heard positive comments about that.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I was
I
gonna
was
say,
just gonna say, if, as long as we're flexible
To go
to
back
put
if
it back
we
to
get
6,
negative
then that,
comments.
I think that's,
I was gonna offer committing for April 1st to put it back on the agenda as like a update or
Yeah,
review or something.
That would
Just
satisfy
to
me.
keep it fresh in our mind.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that this board shift our start time to 5 PM. I'd also ask that, normally in the past, we have done, sometimes we've had an executive session prior to that, but I would ask that only open meeting begin no earlier than 5 PM.
okay, we have a motion, and again, to be clear, motion to give it a try for the month of March, and then put an agenda item on in April to just take a look officially and see how it's going. Very good. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? All right, so that's the plan. And folks, please let us know. I mean, if you're finding out about it now, don't hesitate to let us know. Contact the town hall or any one of us, and please give us your thoughts. But again, we'll revisit this, we'll do this for the next 2 meetings at 5, and then we'll take a look and see in first meeting in April how that's working out for people. Thank you. All right, next is item number 8, which will be a discussion on our surplus town property. regroup discussion. I'm not sure what that means, but go ahead, Justin.
Yep, so Jackie and I had some back and forth on whether or not to call it a kickoff, but I think the topic's been kicked off several times over, but I think we've had some distractions in so many words over the past 6 months, particularly, trying to address some things coming down from the state and whatnot. And we wanted to recommit and kind of refocus on this topic specifically, especially with the new buildings opening in about a year. And as part of that conversation, going through this list of surplus properties the town owns or will own, within a year, having the realization that the board has kind of gone further down the road on some than others. And with a full understanding that out of all those 6, if we address this as one agenda item, we'd be going until midnight. And it wouldn't really give residents an opportunity to weigh in on some of these. They may have interest in 1 or 2, but not the others, and they wouldn't want to sit through them. And so the 6 properties are, at this time next year anyway, the police station, the fire station on Lake Street, the Locust Street parcel, Old Town Hall, otherwise known as the current Council on Aging, Memorial Hall, and 40 School Street, the glue factory, something we wanted to toss in there as well. What we're proposing is taking one of these a night and assigning them to upcoming agendas to tackle one a night. So that way, if people want to come out on that particular building or property, they can come in, provide feedback on it. Some are a little easier, like I said, than others. Police station, for example, I think people feel unanimously that once the PD moves out of there, we can go ahead and surplus that one. But I think we saw with Memorial Hall, where we had the mass development, feedback and forums and things like that, that there were kind of some split and conflicting feelings on that. We might want to discuss a little bit more, just to get more clear direction for us in the office. Kudos to Jackie for putting together this matrix, just so we can kind of keep track of these as we move along in your packet here. So we also wanted to put out some future proposed public meeting dates for some of these well in advance so that people can mark their calendars and make sure they're available. So we're proposing covering 65 North Main Street, otherwise known as the police station, at your upcoming March 4th meeting. That one's not going to require a ton of lead time for us, but we can gather all the materials relative to it. Proposing discussing the fire station at your March 18th meeting, doing a revisit of Locust Street, which is a vacant parcel, at your April 1st meeting. Just as a brief update, I've been speaking with other municipalities who've gone through similar processes and compiled some RFPs from them. It's also my understanding that some RFPs were developed in advance prior to me getting to town, and so maybe a combination of those documents, but I intend to bring something forward to the board April 1st, just to move that along. 38 Maple Street, otherwise known as the Council on Aging, would occur after town meeting. We wanted to give ourselves a little breathing room to get through capping off the budget process. So that would be May 20th. 48 South Main Street, otherwise known as Memorial Hall, would be June 3rd. And then 40 School Street, the glue factory, I don't think we're gonna get a ton of input on, but I would like to start laying the groundwork about potential opportunities for grant funding or development or and just kind of workshop it a little bit, I think, as a group and brainstorm. Would be interesting. So as I mentioned in my memo, didn't really want to get into the weeds this evening, but we wanted to kind of put out a roadmap for future conversations at upcoming select board meetings. Are there any considerations that anybody on the board has that they would like us to, yes?
Yeah, so I would want to talk about Memorial Hall before Locust Street, because as I've said before, if there's, unless someone has a true interest in Memorial Hall on its own, this is no secret, I've mentioned this multiple times, that those be sold together. So if somebody wants to buy Locust Street, which any developer that wound up with it, I think, would have quite a lucrative project, they would have to throw in their proposal buying Memorial Hall and doing something that we like with Memorial Hall. I think that would get us the best return and best project from Memorial Hall. So I think we need to decide, we have to make a final decision at some point what we want from Memorial, what we want, not dollars, but what we want. Do we want 4 affordable apartments? Do we want to tear it down? I think we need, at some point, we had a consultant, we paid a consultant, it was with state funds, but a consultant was paid to do a study of it. We've done public outreach on it. I think it's time that a decision is made. What are we going to do at Memorial Hall? And I think that has to happen before Locust Street.
So if that's agreeable to the group, we can take Council on Aging and shift it to the April meeting. Take Memorial Hall, shift it to the May meeting, and then Locust Street can backfill that June 3rd. Just a little reshuffle.
So I know on your draft warrant, you have police station and then TBD for another. Is your utopian town meeting hope to have two different parcels to be presented at town meeting for some type of either disposition? So I'm just going to say this out loud. I know we're not diving into these, but fire station, I think there's a likely belief that we don't have an interest in selling the fire station, where it's situated, the size of it, septic concerns, all of it related, and how it, is part of the complex that also includes the library. Selling the fire station doesn't make sense. Now, if you want to prove me otherwise, or disabuse me of that idea, I'm open to a discussion. But I think the bigger discussion on town meeting for the fire station is what's going to actually happen. It's not going to have just a vacant building that's sitting there that we've actually put off some deferred maintenance because we knew we were building a new one. So there'll have to be some dollars to either tear down or do something with that facility. So I'm assuming that's not going to come to the agenda at this point. Even if it's just police station for this town meeting, do we actually have a current appraisal of that property? Like, because if we're going to have these discussions, I'd actually like to have it in the realm of, this is what we actually think it's worth. This is what we think it would look like if it came on our tax rolls for an annual tax revenue. If it's combined with other properties that are around there, like behind it is an affordable housing project. If the owners of that project wanted to purchase the land in front to actually expand affordability, what would the value of the property be for that? If it was combined with other property there, those are the items that I think are important to have in the discussion, even if we're having it March 4th or March 18th or whatever. And I'm not sure if we're ready to have that. I don't want to push these off to the next fiscal year discussion because,
Well, but when, the ask for town meeting is for the authorization to dispose of the property.
I agree. I mean, if that's the case, then Locust should come off this, because we've already been given the authorization from town meeting to dispose of Locust. However, I think part of the reason for this is to get some input from the public of what they'd like to see or not see. That doesn't mean that's definitely where this board or town meeting will go. But I also think part of the discussion should be, if we don't do anything at this town meeting for any of these properties, let's use police station, for example, I think we should also start thinking about what is going to be the cost on February, March, April of 2026, where that building becomes vacant, and we're now, mothballing it, continuing to heat it, or are we completely winterizing and shutting off all utilities and counting it as a vacant building? Are we using it for cold storage? I think those discussions should be part of the scenarios as well. I mean, we may go out and issue an RFP to sell the police station and get some responses, but maybe not what we like. We may do a bigger RFP, to Jeff's point, on Memorial Hall and/or Locust Street, combined or not, and like what we see or not like what we see. So I want us to open the aperture of, while I'd love to dispose of or render surplus and somehow relinquish our control over, i.e. get it back on the tax rolls, but understanding if that doesn't happen immediately, what are our costs and logistics, like,
That's
regular-
something
yeah.
we'll have for each of the buildings as we come upon them. We already have some sense of cost from Maya, for example, for what it will be to do
For
the
insurance,
insurance.
yeah.
Because we already, as you saw in operating budget Saturday, have to bring the insurance for the second half of next fiscal year online for the new campus. I've also been assembling maintenance costs over the last few years for each of the town buildings. What are we paying for utilities? What are we paying for upkeep? We had looked at those back before Justin's time when we met at the COA on this topic. So that feedback from that meeting has been incorporated into the matrix, and we'll be updating all of those metrics of, what does it cost to keep these buildings running? We'll have the property record cards, which will give you a sense of a lot of information as well. But that's the goal, is to have a particular date where we're going to get in the weeds on each one, because we keep nibbling around the edges. So we're trying to create some structure. To your point, Brian, I do think timeliness with the police, all town meeting would be asked is if to authorize you to dispose.
No, I agree.
And we do, if you take a look at the action items, intend to get that appraisal done shortly. But I think that's, for us, we need to that's part of building momentum to this.
Is there any, well, understanding that, I guess the way we feel about the police station, is there any appetite to combine police and fire and discuss them? And then perhaps have something, at least for police, for this year's, and again, if you're concerned about not nibbling, or, I don't mean to be hasty, but is that, if we know where that's gonna go,
I mean, I think the fire department is more, we're gonna make a decision not to dispose of the property, and we're actually gonna make a more longer-term decision of what happens to that
I agree.
actual facility. What may likely happen is the building comes down and additional parking and/or maybe storage, what was underneath the building. There's a whole slew of options that I know some have talked about, but we're gonna review. But, having an old fire station sitting vacant in the center of town on the prettiest green space that we have in town until our new town common opens up, is probably not what anybody wants to see. So I think the easier decision on the fire station is getting to this board a recommendation of, we don't want to sell the fire station, so we're not asking town meeting to dispose of it or give us authority to dispose of it. What we're asking town meeting for is, we're going to be coming at some point in the future to talk about what happens on the site that we're going to keep. Police station, I think, to your point, everybody agrees there's no need for us to hold it. We don't have a future use for that. It's an acre. It's not like it's a 7-acre parcel that we'd be looking at what is the future need of the town. None of that is in the realm. And to Jeff's point, I think Memorial Hall is probably, maybe Old Town Hall, but Memorial Hall is probably where we're going to get the largest volume of input from folks that are going to have ideas and others. So when we do bring these items to town meeting this year, next year, even the year after that, while we're only asking for the authority to dispose, I think part of what we should have in our public-facing comments is, these are the things that we're envisioning, rather than just give us the authority to do this and trust us.
And that's the intent on some of them, and I think the fire station's a good example where, since I've been in town, I've heard rumblings and rumors, and I've, got some comments from some of you, but there's never actually been a conversation, at least where I've been in the room, where you've all said, this is what I want you to do. And I think that's kind of the intent on some of those.
There was a select board meeting, a public full select board meeting before you arrived, where that fire station was discussed. It was discussed raising it, and that was a full open meeting discussion prior to your arriving.
And so maybe, I guess more so, I mean, just like a revisit of that, because time has passed and now I'm here.
And the other, to your point as well, part of the discussion is that meeting was a really productive session. We had it back in the fall of 2022. And that meeting created the article that we saw in the spring 2023 town meeting that gave us some money that we've used for the Locust Street appraisal, that we've started to use for the state match for the Memorial Hall feasibility. But we have more to do. We need your authorization to do it the way that article was crafted, because we didn't know who was going to be here. We were in transition. We have to ask you for everything we want to spend out of that article. And the goal of this is for us to get that firm direction of, it's an appraisal, it's this. For fire, it's an engineering report about the retaining wall. So we need to ask you for permission to do those dollar spending, but we're trying to do it where, to your point, Brian, we don't want to rush, but we also are trying to do one meeting one building a night, because that's an achievable amount to actually be productive and get done with all the other business that you still have coming down the pipeline going into town meeting time.
So we,
What about a public hearing for, I mean, is that out of the question? Have a, get our, pieces in line for the fire station, I'm talking about fire station. And then, get some input that way,
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, that's something we
I
can do
mean, in
also.
addition to what we've already discussed, but then we would feel a lot more confident, I think, with,
Yeah,
what,
absolutely.
Well, and these discussions actually could prove helpful if there's anything that we're going to potentially do for this year's town meeting. I mean, we are, I wouldn't say it's an unenviable position, but we're in a decent position on free cash this year due to a collision of a good environment in that the bonded dollars, we were getting a significant interest revenue from that is not going to continue. Why? Because we're quickly building a new campus and those dollars are being spent down. And I think it might be the opportunity, if there's things that beyond, let's sell this property, if there's things we're going to do with properties that we may decide to keep, or this board, I mean, I think the bigger topic is we should be saying, what do we want to keep no matter what? What are we interested in selling and what do we definitely want to sell? I think that's the first discussion this board should be happening. Then we can dive into each respective property at a different meeting, so we actually have a full discussion instead of somebody coming in for 4 hours and listening to all of our properties. But I think, this board needs to show some leadership of, this is what we think we should be keeping, and this is why, and this is what we think we should potentially dispose of, and this is why, and then make the merits and bring it to town meeting if it's something we're going to dispose of, and ask for the ability to be able to sell that surplus property, or this board to entertain the ability to sell the property.
And we do have a request in the capital plan upcoming, I think it was 75,000 is what we landed on ultimately, an additional infusion to deal with engineering studies for certain elements or additional, land surveys or appraisals or things of that nature. And so I think out of that 6, the police station, we can comfortably get on the warrant and get through that conversation. And as you referenced, we do have a placeholder if there's another one, excuse me, that between now and May, we can come to some decision on,
And we-
just to have on there.
And we've done that so far for Locust Street, we don't have to.
Yeah, so
spend
Locust Street, you
extra
don't have
money
to
on
get a
Locust.
vote, but we do want to just slate a meeting to come back
They'll
around
discuss
to
it, but
it.
we're not spending any money on
Decide
it.
what we
Right.
want to do there.
other than the fire station, we should, as soon as possible, get appraisals on, we even Old Town Hall, Maple Street, we should get we need appraisals on anything we want to sell, right?
Yeah, and so maybe we can get the ball rolling on the police station, Old Town Hall, and Memorial Hall.
Yeah.
Just to get values on them, if those are the 3 that we think we may be
Yeah,
parting
we
with.
wanna-
I personally, I think the one on Maple Street, we would probably want to sell if we could.
Is that a motion, Mr. Garber,
Sounded like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to do the appraisals?
to do the appraisals for
Yes,
those
to
3
get
properties?
appraisals on those.
Thank you.
All right,
So, I just have, the Memorial Hall. So what is the path to come up with a consensus or something that we would like to see there? Because we already had a consultant, we already did public, I don't want to do the exact same thing again that we did, a year ago? So I don't know, did we learn anything from that, any direction, or are we starting over, or like, what, or was it time that we just discuss it and maybe we can come to, I don't understand what the path is gonna be to come up with what, or if there would ever be consensus of what, amongst us at least, of what we wanna do with that.
So, and I'm gonna kick it over to Jackie in a minute, because she kind of headed that process, but I will say that while we didn't get, I think, the clearest result out of that process, we did get a good determination on some hard no's, I think, from the community and things that they were insistent on we kept. And so I think maybe taking a quick log of those would be helpful. But Jackie, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I think so there's 2 points there, and I think you bring up one of them, which is we got some hard no's, which is not a bad thing to
Right.
close doors when you're trying to look at your options. I think we also got a lot of things that were important, like we always knew we were going to keep the historic cemetery, and that's the feel from the community as well. We got really strong feedback on the CPA walking trails and on the fields. So I think in a good way, that eliminates, because if you think about it, that rear part of 48 South Main Street is 6.2 acres. It's pretty clear that that 6.2 acres is out of the conversation.
Right.
So now, this feedback is really just focused on that core 1.2 that our current municipal operation is on, the town hall operation. So I think, to your point, Jeff, we don't want to redo things that we've already done. That's why we included the 2017 study about the quality of that building, because with the Memorial Hall feasibility study, that was more of a scope of the entire property, and it did give us some conceptual ideas that will enable you to look at different options with like an eye of what an architect or engineer might do. I do encourage folks to go back to the 2017 study as well. Yes, it's almost a decade old, and yes, the numbers for what construction are going to cost are wildly out of date, but what the problems are still pretty well identified and laid out. And I think that's the part of the conversation that we have to start having next when we do have that meeting is, we know that the surrounding property is a keep for the municipality. What does the building look like? What does the structure look like, if anything? And that's where I would say we need to come in having read that 2017 study and be prepared. I'm putting together the utility study, updating that from when we looked at it 2 years ago, to say, how much is it going to cost to keep it? What would someone actually be able to afford to do to, make it something? All of those different, components. And that's when we can start to have a conversation of, if we keep it, here's what it costs. If somebody else keeps it, here's what it costs them. Is there someone who's going to be on the market for
There's
this?
huge differences in those two numbers.
Correct.
It could be less than half what it would cost someone in the private sector to renovate that building than what it would cost us.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think the cost from 2017 to 2025, if you
Just
put
the
just a regular
materials.
material and inflationary projection on that, it's probably not going to look much different to what the cost would be with somebody building it outside of a municipal requirement around prevailing wage. That, if there's anything that I learned from the study that was done by the group that was funded from Mass Development was, we did get some good input from folks, but a lot of the comments we heard is, we need a community center. That's great, we're building one right down the road, it's that big building you see that's being built. And I think some of it were, people were interested in giving input, but didn't really actually understand a lot of what was already happening and what was causing this to become vacant. So I think Memorial Hall is an example like the police station. We're not going to hold on to that building to sit vacant for a whole slew of reasons. A, the cost of keeping that building alive and not put a big red X on the front saying it's vacant is probably going to outstrip our ability to do something with it. B, I don't think we have a need for that building for anything. So I think the discussion should be, again, like the fire station, we're going to sell it or we're going to keep it. But that's probably the one that's going to take much longer to decide what we're going to do. I'm a big believer between that and Locust Street, whether it's together or separate. This board needs to issue an RFI at some point in the not-too-distant future. There are organizations, both state and others, that can help us with the visioning around that RFI. I think your point, Jeff, I actually don't disagree with, of if we want to do something at Locust that has some appropriate building that helps support our ability for affordable, both big A and small A affordable, but also doing something at Memorial Hall that keeps the character of that building and what folks that either drive through this town every day or people that live here think of when they see that building. We're going to have to be very prescriptive in how we design an RFP post-RFI to bidding that. And what we may be surprised if we issue an RFI is, okay, builders, developers, and the Affordable Housing Trust has been meeting with some different groups that have given us some names of developers that are focused on affordable, but appropriate affordable, that may want to respond to an RFI and say, well, this is what I would be willing to do with that property, both Locust and/or Memorial Hall. So if we as a board say, we think we should sell, then I think we move to the next phase, which is, what does it look like if we sell? Because I think the public thinks when they sell their home, it's, well, I sold it, now the next owner does what they want within zoning. We have the ability to sell, we're gonna sell property. We could sell the police station and say, we only want a purple building to be put on the ground there. Would be a foolish decision, but we have the ability to do that. So I think that's where we open up to the public for comment is, if that building is sold and repurposed for affordable housing or offices or whatever, what do you want it to look like? What do you want it to be like?
But I think, if I may, just to get back to process, because I think we don't want to go down the rabbit hole of any one building tonight. That's the part of where we learned more than I think we thought we would with the feasibility study, and I think it narrowed our focus to just that 1.2 acres, Jeff, to your earlier question. And I think that does make it easier. I think with the board tonight, having an appraisal, whether you sell a property or not, it's a helpful tool in terms of reuse and value. So I think that's a good step forward as well, because then what we can do is go into that evening with, that's the night we have the conversation of, here's the logistics, here's the costs, here's all of that background information, and with that context, have an initial conversation for this board, and then from there, decide what additional public input you're looking to get from that conversation.
I think that the Maple Street one is gonna be a challenge. I don't know what, and then what would, I can't even imagine what somebody, would they tear it down, and if they did, what, with the zoning, is there anything that would even make sense?
And, you know, the other complicating factors that the Tramp House is on that same parcel, which is a historic building.
That could be moved, right? Maybe by the rail trail or something, which would be more appropriate?
I mean, I don't know how easily.
I would say we'll come prepared with different options for the night that we have the meeting on it, but I think the goal is to also have these sessions, the proposed public input meetings that we talked about, so we can notice the groups, you know, there are folks that are gonna be interested in this conversation, we wanna have them at the table, and that way everybody has the information, everybody has the data, everybody has the backup, and we know, like, on this night, we're talking about this building.
And maybe when we talk about Maple Street, maybe ahead of time, I have them in the room, the building inspector, like, what could somebody within zoning do with that piece of land?
Sure.
It's either repurpose it or tear it down, because I can't think of many options for that property.
And it is residentially zoned, but we'll certainly.
Would it be economically feasible to buy it, tear it down,
Yeah.
and put a duplex? I don't know if the,
We'll be getting weigh-in from, I already spoke with the assessors, they've started putting together items for all these properties for your packets for the night in question. We'll get certainly feedback from the building commissioner, from our new planner. There's a lot of, you know, resources in town, there's a lot of boards and committees that all have input as well, but the goal is to kind of have a singular night where we get going again on each building.
So, with Memorial Hall, when we're getting a appraisal, we can't appraise 1.2 acres, because some of that has to stay as parking for the field. So it's maybe the building and 0.6 acres.
Yeah, I'd say keeping the fields there, which is what we heard, but keeping the fields there is going to dramatically affect the value of that property in terms of a sale. You know, and we can talk about all of these when we dive into the Memorial Hall, but I'm more interested in, if we're going to town meeting this year for the police station, it would be nice to have some clear knowledge of the value of that property.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with that property, it's, what can we get for it? I mean, I don't think we're contemplating in any discussion that we've had that we would dispose of it with restrictions on it, or with, you know, we want to see this on it. It's market, free enterprise, tell me what's the most that
No,
you
I
will pay.
don't disagree, but I think,
But, and that's what an appraisal will give us.
and I'm thinking the same myself anyway on Maple Street.
well, I think Maple Street's gonna be more difficult just because of, A, the Tramp House, B, that building needs such a significant amount of work. And the septic surely needs to be done, the retaining wall, if it hasn't failed yet, is on its way, which is gonna have an effect on the septic. So it's really, the value of that building may just be a raw land value.
I think it probably is.
And
Less than that.
and at a minimum, if that's a residential zoned and someone purchases it and puts a, as your point, a
Duplex.
single or a duplex up, let's not lose sight of the fact, it's not just the revenue we got in the sale, it's now that property's on the tax roll and is a duly paying tax.
No, the Tramp House was, that was moved there, right? That's not where it's been for 100 years, right?
That's correct, it's not its original location.
Right, so if
So
we
that
could,
could be moved.
if we could move it by the, you of all people, move it by the rail trail, that would really,
All sorts of places,
that would be the appropriate
not far
place
away.
for it. Yeah.
So I would say, as just demonstrated, it's very easy to weave in and out of the weeds on each of these properties, because we've talked about all 6 of them in the past 2 minutes. So, as a regroup, I think we accomplished the goal for this evening. We'll bring these forward individually to future meetings, and I think we got some good marching orders in the interim. And I would offer that May doesn't necessarily need to be the deadline for all of these. It's certainly not, that it wouldn't be practical, but we are eyeing a potential for a special town meeting in the fall. If it's a matter of getting the police station on for May and then getting whatever, pick another one on for October, that's an option as well. So just something to keep an eye on.
All right, so we're okay with making those adjustments on the meeting dates, and we're okay with what action taken to go ahead and get appraisals for those three, properties.
Mr. Chair,
Does it need to be a vote, or?
It was a
There
motion,
was a
there was a
motion.
motion and a second,
That's
we
what I
have to
mean, I
take a
wanna
vote.
go
who
beyond.
made the second? I'm sorry, I missed
I'm
the.
s-
Oh,
okay,
you did,
I didn't
okay.
hear you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, and no further discussion.
And the motion is to appraise those
To
three.
appraise those three properties.
38 Maple, 65 North Main, and 48 South Main.
Correct.
Are we appraising School Street?
We already, no,
No, we've
School
never
Street,
appraised that.
School Street.
We actually issued an
I was
RFP at
thinking
one
Wells
point
Street.
to, or,
I'll add that to the list, but that might be, I'll add it to the list, but I may come back with something different.
yeah,
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to get appraisal for
4 buildings.
4 buildings. School Street, Memorial Street, Council on Aging, and the fire station.
No, police station.
I'm sorry, the police station. All right, no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none, passed unanimously. All right, and we
Thank you.
adjusted those dates on that. All right. Let's see here, where are we? Okay, now, we're gonna move on to number 9, which is, take a look at the letter we've seen in draft form, just to, continue the discussion with the state in regards to the Mass Works grant. Justin, if you would.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, in conversations that you and I have had, we've talked about, I think, the importance of being proactive on this item in particular. We've had a lot of conversation adjacent to this grant. This grant has kind of guest starred in a lot of the conversations we've had about MBTA communities and the potential risk of losing funding for state grants. This one's in a little bit of a gray area because of the period in which it was awarded. The award letter came with a deadline with an expectation to be in compliance by the end of December of last calendar year. After that, the courts came through and pushed back all of the deadlines, which means we're kind of within that area. We did put forth an action plan by the February 13th deadline, albeit slightly non-traditional, but very much well-intended from an aspect of trying to have a dialogue and engage the state in a productive way, rather than everybody going to their own corners and sue each other into oblivion, which seems to be the position that some communities are taking, and that's not the approach that we're looking for here. So relative to this grant specifically, we're just trying to reach out to the governor's office, laying out some reminders about why the community applied for that grant to begin with. And there are several reasons, but among them, a road safety audit that was done by MassDOT, or commissioned by MassDOT rather, that highlighted that the intersections within that project area are within the top 5% by crash frequency of intersection crash locations on the Metropolitan Area Planning Council area. and that the project area was found to have a motor vehicle crash rate above the MassDOT District 4 average crash rate for signalized intersections. And so it's very much a public safety issue. It's the reason we tried to identify those funds. And I think having that project fall apart and leaving those intersections in their present condition, for lack of a better word, would be a reckless decision, and we have concerns about that. The other element is that in a act of great irony, that grant is helping serve and respond to a 60-unit multifamily housing development in the heart of our town center, which is a very large development for a community of Middleton size. And I think the irony of being a project that supports housing, however, Middleton is being, in so many words, punished for not complying to a law that's intended to help generate housing. I think it just on its face is kind of a little backwards. And so trying to point out and underscore that the intent of this project is to support housing and to do it in a way that Middleton can kind of dig deep in a productive way for a community of our size. So I thought it was important to kind of underscore that, get that message out there, try to be proactive, and once again, try to engage in a conversation rather than just kind of sitting and waiting.
And to redirect the focus that was on this area long before we took a vote for anything to do with the MBTA. I mean, this wasn't, this focus was purely on that area and had nothing to do with the rest of those things. And, while things are somewhat in abeyance as to what's going on, they haven't told us we don't have the money. And I'm not trying to say, I don't want to hear that answer, but again, while we reference the whole, EOLHC and everything, this was important to us before any of that ever happened, and I think that's why it's important that we, maintain the discussion with them.
So what I'd ask in the last paragraph, the second sentence where it's underlined, says it directly promotes housing development. I'd say directly promotes affordable housing development. Portion of those units are affordable.
And when we mentioned this, I don't know if this is grandstanding or not, but when we mentioned the 60 unit and not mentioning the 40B portion, is that the thought behind that?
Sorry,
It's
I'm still
grandstanding.
looking for what Brian's.
I'm sorry.
Last
Maybe it's grandstanding, I
paragraph,
don't know.
second sentence,
They're
where it's
probably
underlined.
concerned with-
Next page.
Next page. Oh, sorry.
Is it on page 2?
Yeah,
Yeah,
last paragraph, second sentence.
The underlying piece.
Yeah.
Promotes affordable housing
Oh,
development.
gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, because all 60 of those will be counted on the SHI because of their rental status.
Yep, that's an important point. And then, sorry, Rick, you were saying, highlighting that it's a 40,
Yeah, I mean, are they aware that that's what that was, albeit a friendly 40B? I mean, when we
It was a
mentioned this-
40B that the town actually actively engaged in negotiations to make what we believe was a better project for the town than what was proposed and would have gone directly to the state on.
collaborative.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think adding language, highlighting it's 40
Something to
Bs,
that,
yeah,
right.
I'll get something in there.
It may be, in the end where it says the 25,000 vehicles reference, I don't know how we don't have an exact number, but the majority of those
Go right through that
are
intersection.
not Middleton residents.
Yeah.
If she wants to penalize Middleton, she's penalizing mostly people that don't live in Middleton.
It's a regional issue and not Middleton specific.
To that point, there might be something in the data from when Lars did the traffic study to that effect of like what was in-town traffic versus out of town. There was something about that.
I don't think they have a way to break that out.
MassDOT had like a calculation for it, if I recall. We should
can
look, we
look
should,
at it.
I'll ask.
Yeah,
we should
let's-
We
revisit.
should know clearly on average, how many vehicles go through that intersection, not just through the town. The vast majority of the vehicles that come through our town go through that intersection.
So that 25,000 is a count from that study.
Okay.
So that's
Right,
the
but the
first
major, I would say well more than 50% of those cars are not Middleton resident, way more are not Middleton residents. They're going from Salem to Lawrence.
Bet
So-
you about 90%.
Right, I agree with you, Brian. So they're,
Well,
but
and you
she's
know
not
what?
punishing Middleton, just,
Well, and what might help that is if I recall, they had times of the traffic flow too, I think, so that, I don't know if they have, that might be a data breakout that could illustrate, the time of day, the traffic. I thought that might have been in that, and then that might, to your point,
there's no
might
question,
indicate it's-
to Brian's point, there's no question.
That it's people
It could be
that-
90% of
that
those
don't live
people
here.
that are stuck in that traffic that aren't Middleton residents. You think you're punishing just the residents of Middleton, you're punishing the whole Essex County.
So, making those edits, is the board comfortable with voting to authorize Rick to sign that and send it along this week?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Do you need a formal vote on that?
I would take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve this letter under the chairperson's signature as discussed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passed unanimously. In the end, it is the intersection, not us.
Right.
Let's see here. All right, thank you. Thank you, folks, for that. All right, do we have any updates and announcements before we close things?
I want to continue on my theme of hydrants. With the new hydrants put up as part of the water line expansion, I would urge, people to check with their insurance companies or agents if they're now close to a new fire hydrant. Sometimes insurance companies either give you a credit or avoid a surcharge by being closer to a fire hydrant, so check with your insurance company.
Good, good.
When is that,
Can't-
when are we expecting the project to be done there?
So bulk of the work is going to be wrapping up in the next several weeks, but they have to let it settle and then do
go
final
back.
final
Yeah.
paving.
It's quiet right now, but. And there'll be a number of those survey, if you recall on Essex, which was a shorter stretch, although it doesn't really indicate service, but there was quite a few, cuts they came back and did
Good.
for hydrants, and I think a couple people that asked for, that were looking to tie up.
Action, yeah.
So not many.
They're bringing stubs to the side of the road now?
Yeah.
Yep.
just,
For every lot?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
All right, if nothing else, all right. Meeting's adjourned.